Chapter 7 2-1 The thrum of powerful engines buzzed beneath Ray's feet. She opened her eyes to a long line of golfers teeing up to drive their balls into the open ocean. The floor tilted, and she adjusted her balance. Not a floor, a deck. Ray stood aboard what appeared to be an enormous luxury cruise liner, and, peering over what must have been the starboard side, she saw scores of identical decks neatly stacked above and below her. The monumental ship glared in the brilliant sunshine. She squinted and shaded her eyes with her hand, but still couldn't see where the ship started or ended. Its long lines just disappeared into the haze of the horizon as they pressed on through frothing waves. A typical simulation. She'd forgotten that this cluster constructed cruise liner scenarios in metastasis. So many of them did. Observing the golfers on her deck, she noticed that only a few used regular clubs. Some wielded hefty wooden staves, some baseball bats, others swung what looked like augmented speed bats, humming with kinetic energy. One guy held what appeared to be an amputated leg that still looked functional. As he swung it, the leg kicked heartily at the ball. The balls themselves were also of peculiar variety. For a start, some were alive. Small furry creatures cursed as the golfers battered them far out into the open ocean. Fireballs seemed popular, as were explosive missiles, talking heads, and chickens. Some roasted, some still clucking. This menagerie of objects sailed through the air, falling through a series of illuminated targets, which pinged and played music, before plopping into the waters far below. The golfers were ecstatic. They couldn't get enough of it. And as soon as the ship's drones, clad in impeccable white, teed up an unfortunate subject, they'd swing with gusto and smack it out to sea. One guy was getting worked up, protesting at the top of his voice that his drone wasn't doing its job properly. He soon lost his patience, yanked it onto the platform, and thwacked it as hard as he could. Programmed for such eventualities, the drone plummeted hundreds of feet, skipping through the multicoloured targets, whilst wailing a prolonged and comically computerised exclamation. It finished with a well-timed "uh-oh," just as it plopped into the heavy swells of the ocean. The golfers guffawed and slapped their legs. This was one hell of a cruise. Ray sighed. She should have expected this. It had been the same in their last session. Time to find the bar. A few decks up from the cartoonish driving range, Ray slouched on a bar stool and swilled a blended whiskey around her glass. Because of the law of consistency, she could only drink in a simulation where drinking alcohol might be considered realistic. Luxury cruise ships have abundant bars, so logically she'd have no problems enjoying their wares here. Had the metastasis rig formed a different simulation for the cluster, like a kindergarten scenario, then a bar would have been totally inappropriate, and therefore absent altogether. Ray sipped her whiskey, glad she'd not ended up in a kindergarten scenario. They were some of the worst. She recalled an incident from the last time she'd worked one, shuddered, and drained her glass. The drone poured her another generous measure. Encoded into the metastasis, the law of consistency helped sustain a stable environment for panmotechs like Ray. The group mind of a cluster could be fickle and volatile. Circumstances changed, but at the very least, the basic physics underpinning the simulation needed to stay the same. Simulations had been dangerously erratic during the early days of metastasis. Floors and walls melted away at random. People morphed into other objects or creatures. Fundamentals like gravity and temporal continuity were anybody's guess. And even the geometric planes of the construct became unreliable. Any minute, their three-dimensional surroundings might snap into 2 dimensions or worse. Such simulations were so chaotic that they were impossible for a panmotech to work in. Not to say hazardous for their mental health. It was time to get on with the job. Her bosses were always on at her to meet her targets. She necked the whiskey, tossed the glass over her shoulder, and trudged out of the bar. The bridge was stationed at the top of the liner and looked over the vast expanse of the ship. Ray could just make out the bows, way ahead, casting a dense cloud of sea spray over the horizon. The bridge itself was almost entirely vacant. No furniture, no instruments, no crew bustling about their stations. With only a wide-open wooden floor, the room was more like an empty dance studio. But in place of a wall of practice mirrors stood a broad window with a panoramic view of the ocean. The only activity, made miniature by the surrounding space, was Captain Aubrey Haverholt playing table tennis with a drone. He played a decent game. "Hi, Captain, can I have a word?" asked Ray. He didn't look up from his rally. Sure. Go ahead. "I just came aboard. General nautical maintenance, nothing too drastic, some tweaks here and there." Yes. Splendid. The drone struck the ball deep, and Captain Haverholt took a long step back, crouched and sliced it over the net, low and crafty. Go ahead. Go ahead. His eyes never left the game. "I'll be working in a few awkward places. Need a few of your access codes, if you don't mind." Yes, I see. The drone sent the captain a wide shot, and he snatched at it, hoping to slam it straight back and win the point. But the ball refused to curl downwards and sailed over the edge of the table and off across the empty wooden floor. "Fuck!" he shouted, as the drone hovered off to fetch the ball. "You fucker! You fucking fucker!" So, about those access codes. Captain Haverholt looked at her for the first time and blinked, offended. "Well, you can't have them. So you'd best bugger off, hadn't you? Because you can't bloody well have them, and that's all there is to it." Although in his mid-50s, the bearded captain had the demeanour of a spoilt schoolboy playing conkers in the playground. The drone hovered back and prepared to serve. "Nines?" "Come on then, you fucker." The captain tapped the table with his bat. "Got you this time." This kind of petulance was typical from these executive archetypes. In Ray's experience, they could be incredibly childish, so she treated them like children. "I can see you're cross, Captain," she said, trying to appease him. "And I understand, I do. I bet you're brilliant at table tennis. Much better than that silly machine. And if you gave me those codes..." The drone served fast and low with plenty of side spin. The captain returned, but he'd miscalculated the spin, and the ball bounded away from the table. "You do not understand." He wiped his bushy moustache and glared at her. "Just go away, interfering woman." He was getting angrier. Ray figured it was the type of anger that might boil over into tears if she let it play out. She retreated a few steps from the table. 10-9, match point. Yeah. blah, blah, fucking serve, why don't you? Captain Haverholt stood poised and ready, brow furrowed, bottom lip protruding. The drone served straight down the middle, towards his body. It was awkward, but he shifted his weight and flicked a backhander into the corner. The drone found it, dropping it smoothly along the outside of the table. It was nice, but the captain anticipated the shot well and whipped it over the net even faster, channeling his aggression. The ball went deep. The drone struggled to recover, but caught it on the edge of its bat. The little white ball ricocheted high into the air and, out of sheer luck, plopped directly onto the mesh net and rolled onto the captain's side. Game, trainer drone B9T. Well played, Captain. We should work on your forehand slams. Ah! The captain's bat flew and clattered off the drone's casing. He stormed off, raging. And once he'd stropped a sufficient distance, he plonked himself on the floor, arms and legs crossed, his back to the table. Would you care to run a few forehand slam drills, Captain? He jerked his head over his shoulder. No, I fucking wouldn't, all right? Just fuck off, all right? Just fuck off. Before he turned away, Ray noticed a small pool of tears spill into the creases of his cheek. He wiped at them, pretending to smooth his beard. After the drone had swivelled around and obediently fucked off, Ray approached the sulking captain and asked if she could join him. He turned his face farther from her and hunkered himself down. She took the last few steps and sat beside him. You're upset, she said, validating his tantrum. It is upsetting when we lose something, isn't it? Especially if it's something important to us. The captain remained silent. Ray tried to summon something like genuine interest. So, how did you get to be so good at table tennis? You made some fantastic shots. Captain Haverholt snivelled and mumbled a few words. Sorry, she said, I didn't quite catch that. I said I've always been good at table tennis. Don't you fucking hear me? Are you fucking deaf? Oh, I see. Ray kept her patience remarkably well. You've always had an eye for the game, Well, it shows. You're a natural. She looked off to the horizon where the captain was staring. Oh, I bet it's annoying playing drones. They have that edge. You know what I mean? They're machines. I bet you'd beat anyone on this boat. Any real person, that is. Why didn't you play someone else? The crew or the passengers? There was an unhappy pause that Ray was tempted to fill, but she held the silence. The captain stared into the distance. Captain, he managed, at last, with a shiver. Ray inclined her head. So, you're in charge. And I guess that means you don't feel comfortable mixing with the others. She dipped down a little, trying to catch his eye. His bottom lip nudged out from his salt and pepper beard, and he nodded, ashamed to speak aloud. Lonely being a captain, isn't it? He nodded again. There was a sob. All this responsibility, this enormous ship, so many people, and it all rests on your shoulders. Ray waited while he wiped the tears from his cheeks and the mucus from his nose. I think anybody would get upset now and then. She reached for his shoulder and held it in a friendly grip. I think they're lucky to have you. No shame in letting off a bit of steam now and then. Thank you, he managed. There's no need, really. She mulled an idea over. You know what, though? It would be such a help if you gave me those access codes. Maybe, when I'm finished with these fiddly little jobs, I'll pop back and see how you're doing. How's that sound? Sounds good. Hey, we might even manage a game ourselves. I don't play so well, but it might be fun. Yeah, he nodded before swiping his eyeline over hers, transferring his access codes. We could do that. Yeah, we could do that. Ray double-checked her eyeline and stood up. Well, pleased to meet you, Captain. Thanks for the codes. She looked around the room and frowned to herself. You take care of everything up here, and remember, it's okay to get upset sometimes. You deserve it. It's okay, he said, trying a brief smile. I'm fine now. I'm all right. Ray paused for a beat. Yep, she said, and walked off the bridge, eyes wide in disbelief.